This is the Comics Alternative, episode 250, reviews of The Death of Stalin, Moonstruck #1, and Kros, Hallowed Ground. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Comics Alternative. I'm Derek.
And I'm Andy, and we're two guys with PhDs talking about comics.
And this week, Andy and I are going to look at three new titles. We're going to begin with The Death of Stalin by Fabien Nury and Thierry Robin. After that, we're going to look at the first issue of Moonstruck, written by Grace Ellis with art by Shae Beagle. And after that, we're going to look at a kick-started comic, Kros, Hallowed Ground, by John Ostrander and Tom Mandrake. But before we get into that discussion, we want to let all of you know that this episode of the Comics Alternative is brought to you by the great folks at Discount Comic Book Service. Go to their website, dcbservice.com, for all of your comics pre-ordering needs. There, you're going to find all DC, Marvel, Image, and Dark Horse titles at 40% off the cover price if you pre-order. For all of the other publishers, you'll find that those discounts will be anywhere from 20 to 35% off the cover price, and every single month you're going to find some unbelievable, mind-blowing specials. Sometimes those mind-blowing specials could be as much as 45% off the cover price, sometimes 50% off cover, but every now and again you can find discounts that are more impressive than that.
That's right, and since we're talking about The Death of Stalin, you can check that out. It's available on DCB Service for 30% off, and the latest issue of Moonstruck from Image Comics is issue number 3, and you can find that for 40% off.
That's right, you can find great discounts every single month at Discount Comic Book Service on the titles that we discuss and many, many others. Go to dcbservice.com. They will take care of all of your comics pre-ordering needs. And after you do get your titles there, please be sure to send them an email and tell them that the two guys with PhDs sent you.
That's right.
Well, Andy, as we record this, San Diego Comic-Con is wrapping up. And I guess some news was made there, as it is every year. But the kind of announcements that were going on, did anything really stand out to you?
Well, I think probably the biggest announcement that came out of San Diego Comic-Con was the fact that Bloomsbury announced the comic studies topics and comic studies series. I don't think that they didn't do it at San Diego, but they timed it in coordination with San Diego, right?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And what Andy is referring to is a series that actually Andy and I are both a part of. And we've wanted to mention this before on the podcast, but because there hadn't been an official announcement from the publisher, Bloomsbury Academic, we held off. A brand new series of texts called the Bloomsbury Comic Studies Series was just announced, and the first 2 volumes that will be coming out this fall, one of them Andy wrote and on autobiography. So that was announced, and so of course that was the the biggest news for you during the San Diego Con. But my editor did tell, and I'm the general editor of the series, my editor at Bloomsbury did tell me that they were wanting to time this with San Diego. So I'm glad that they ended up doing that.
Yep. And it didn't get covered at all by any of the comics news outlets. So it's probably a good idea that we share it because it clearly got buried.
That's right. Although I don't know if it was because of the announcement on the Bloomsbury blog or because of the various postings that went out on social media, some of which you put up, Andy, but I have gotten 2 or 3 queries from scholars trying to pitch me ideas for future volumes.
Well, there you go.
And I appreciate that. I think we have our hands full with the series as it is right now, but I'm always willing to take new ideas. But I'm just pleased that, Andy, you're going to be doing one of the first books in the series. So it will be a flagship volume.
Well, thanks. And I appreciate the opportunity to do this. And also, I'm glad it's done. I'm really looking forward to it coming out.
Yes, I am too. But yeah, and there were other announcements that were coming out from various publishers. I have to be honest, I didn't follow it this year like I have in the past, primarily just because I had other things going on with my move to North Carolina, this is our first episode that we're recording since I have, I guess, permanently, at least for now, moved to North Carolina. So, but because of all of the hustle and bustle and the chaos of the move, I really didn't keep up with the news that much.
Yeah, I guess the one, I'm just kind of going through. I mean, I'm sure there were a lot of things that that struck me as interesting as the show was going on. I was kind of paying attention to things on social media. Probably one of the first announcements that really hit me as significant was that I think it was Top Shelf announcing Volume 4 of the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Ah, that's right. I did see that.
And that Alan Moore and Kevin O'Neill are also announcing that they are retiring from comics after that book comes out. So
that's right.
Yeah. So that's that I thought was one of the bigger things, since we've talked about those books several times on the show. That first of all, excited that there's going to be another volume, kind of, less excited about the fact that those two creators might be done with comics. But, if Alan Moore ends his career on, Providence and and hopefully really good League of Extraordinary Gentlemen volume, then that'll be okay.
Yeah, it'll be going out on an up note.
Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of obligates us now to reviewing that next League of Extraordinary Gentlemen book, which, we probably would do anyhow, but knowing that this is going to be not only the last in that series, but the last from both of those creators, we're definitely on board for that. Other big news, of course, coming out of San Diego was the announcement of the Eisner Award winners for 2017. And, there's some really impressive award winners that received awards. And for me, I guess one of the most notable wins this year was that of Sonny Liu. He won 3 Eisner Awards for his book, The Art of Charlie Chan Hak Chai. And, that book was both on your and my list for the 10 best of 2016. Sonny has been on the podcast a couple of times, and so I think that is... I feel close to him, not only because of the book, because I've met him. He spoke at UT Dallas, and we interviewed him, Gwen and I, for the show. So I'm really pleased that he won for that.
Yeah, I am too. That is a groundbreaking book, and I think, it's one I think that, the Eisner voters can be confident that people will still be talking about that book years from now. Mm-hmm. Right. And so it was a tough year. There were things like Rosalie Lightning from Tom Hart didn't win anything, but it was going up against some pretty heavy stuff, including Sonny Liu and March Book 3, which pretty much had a slam dunk on that best reality-based category. So there wasn't a lot that I felt like, complaining about, I guess, with this year's Eisners. I think, Sonny Liu was the standout for me too, deserving those those 3 wins. I was really happy to see Jason Chiga's Demon get the best graphic album reprint. That was probably one of the big surprises out of the stuff there. For a lot of the other things I was happy with, it was more that, things that I'm glad won and would have probably been upset if they hadn't. So like Michael Tisserand's George Harriman biography, Crazy, winning for best comic related book, and the Complete Women's Comics winning for best archival collection. I felt those were 2 that were the most deserving in their category. So I'm glad those won.
Yeah, and there were some expected wins. You mentioned March winning for best reality-based work, which I kind of expected that. Also I more or less expected Raina Telgemeier to win for Ghosts in the best publication for kids category, ages 9 through 12. And then, as seems to almost always happen for the past several years, you get the team of Saga winning, right? So Brian K. Vaughan won, a couple of awards, right? And then Fiona Staples won for, best artist, I guess?
Yeah, and best cover artist.
Cover artist, yeah.
For both of those, so.
Yeah, and I know people had joked in the past that anytime that Fiona Staples or Brian K. Vaughan were up, especially for Saga, they're going to get it. You may as well just write it off. And they won a number of times this year as well. But, there were also some surprises. Like for best humor category, Jughead got it. Zdarsky, Ryan North, Erica Henderson, and Derek Charm got that for Archie. So congratulations to them. I'm just a little surprised given some of the other contenders in that category.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but congratulations too to Erica Henderson and Ryan North for both getting two awards, because they also won for The Unbeatable Squirrel Girl and the best publication for teens.
Yeah. Also, really glad that Jeff Lemire and Dean Ormston won for Black Hammer as the best new series, especially given the fact that we just recently had Jeff Lemire on the show.
Exactly.
It's the comics alternative bump.
There you go.
We see that with Sonny Liu. We see that with Brian K. Vaughan. We see that with Jeff Lemire. Yeah, it's
Erica Henderson.
Yeah, that's right. We had her on a few years ago. But
yeah, Andrew Aiden and Nate Powell.
That's right. See, they thought that they were winning it because of the strength of John Lewis. Actually, it's because Andrew and Nate were on the comics alternative.
Yeah, and I think that's doubly true for Brian K. Vaughan. I don't think there's any other reason why he would win an award other than that he's been on our show.
Yeah. Also Evan Dorkin won for best single issue one shot with Beasts of Burden, What the Cat Dragged In. We had him on, and we had him on for the longest interview we've ever done in our history, and so I'm sure that contributed to that win. Not so much the work of Jill Thompson and also his wife Sarah Dyer. It's being on the comics alternative.
Yep.
Yeah. And another thing I'm really happy that they got right. You've heard me gripe several times about this year's screw up when it comes to best webcomic and best digital comic, where there were digital comics in the webcomics category and vice versa. Well, I'm pleased to see that Bird Boy, which is actually a webcomic, won in the best webcomic category, and Bandette, which is a digital comic, actually won for the best digital comic category.
Yep.
So congratulations to all the winners for this year's Eisner Awards.
Yes, congratulations. And to those who got nominated, congratulations to you too.
That's right. Yeah,
it's
not everybody
an honor
can
to
win.
Be nominated.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and we hope to be someday. Well, Andy, let's move into the review show proper, and we're going to begin with The Death of Stalin. This is written by Fabien Nury and with art by Thierry Robin, and this came out through Titan Books. Now, this, as it says on the cover of the book, this is the comic that inspired the movie. And one question I have is, I'm assuming that this is a new comic, but is this a reprint of it, or is it coming out in a new form? Because if it inspires the movie, how long has this book been out?
I don't know that if it was originally published. It looks like it was probably originally published in French, because the copyright is for Dargard. Which is
Degard, yeah.
Sorry, how do you say that?
Degard,
yeah, Dargaud,
right?
And so I'm guessing it was published in French prior to this.
So this may be the first English release,
right? But we've seen with some things, like even Brian Wood's Briggs Land was sold as a TV series before that first issue even came out. So, publishers are getting pretty savvy about circulating new books, new comics, even and graphic novels, even before they've hit the stands, in order to get that get those deals done. But in this case, I mean, the movie I think is almost complete, if not complete. Mm.
Yeah. Also, I mean, you're right about Hollywood now picking up properties before the first issue of a series has even been released, as in the case of Briggs Land. This, though, seems quite a bit different from the situation that we have with Briggs Land. You know, Briggs Land's an ongoing series that could develop. It had a different kind of premise. This is based on a true story, the death of Joseph Stalin. And I just wondered, why make this comic and why make this book, or why make the movie? So I guess knowing that this was originally published in French, that's where it gained some traction, and then they decided they want to, I guess, make a film out of this, which would be interesting. And I can't remember who all stars in that film. We've talked about it on a previous episode.
Yeah, it's on the back cover of the book.
Oh, let me look at the back cover.
Yeah. Actually, it does say also available in print in English for the first time on the back cover, so we probably should pay attention to that. But, yeah, I mean, first of all, the film is directed and written by Armando Iannucci, who probably best known in the U.S. for Veep, but also made the movie In the Loop, which was also based on his TV series, The Thick of It, which is one of my favorite shows of all time. Veep is as well. And then and
that's been getting a lot of love over the past couple of years.
Yeah, and so the movie is going to include Jeffrey Tambor, Steve Buscemi, Timothy Dalton, Jason Isaacs, and several other people. And so, I think Michael Palin is in it. That's right. Listed on the thing, on the cover. But so, and you mentioned this is based on a true story, and I think so. One of the questions might be, well, why not just make a movie about the death of Stalin based on the historical record? And I think what probably attracts Iannucci to this, since most of his work is, political satire and farce, is that this is political satire.
It is, yeah.
And it is a farce. I mean, there are some really, really crazy farcical elements to this story, including, Stalin's brain being dropped on the floor during the autopsy.
And splattering.
I'm looking forward to that scene in the movie in particular. So it is, so for people going into this book thinking they're going to get, maybe a historical version of Stalin's death, probably not the case, but it is a very funny book, and it deals with the kind of, well, the Soviet bureaucracy, the vacuum that's left. Mm-hmm. Not even by the death of Stalin, but by his incapacitation, and then also the kind of farcical elements that come up from the way the Soviet communist system worked. Mm-hmm. And for example, how difficult it is to get a doctor to come help Stalin when he's ill. I mean, because
most of the really good ones had been sent away or shot.
Right.
As enemies of the state.
Right. So there's no, so that's some heavy irony there, but also that there's, so that there's a lot of ways in which, it seems like in this book anyway, that Stalin's life could have gone on a little longer had he gotten some proper care right away, but instead it's delayed not only by the bureaucracy, but the kind of politics of how, what has happened with the doctors in the Soviet Union previously.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned Veep, because this does have that same kind of feel. The farcical nature of politics, and it is based on real events, and it says on the cover, based on true story. However, before the story proper, the creators have a disclaimer where they do point out that, it's based on real events, but it's, as they say, this book is nonetheless a work of fiction. Artistic license has been used to construct a story from historical evidence that was at best patchy, at times partial, and often contradictory. And then they go on to say that, having said this, the authors would like to make clear that their imaginations were scarcely stretched in the creation of the story, since it would have been impossible for them to come up with anything half as insane as the real events surrounding the death of Stalin. So even from the very first page, they're having fun with this. Speaking about the very first part of this story, one of the things I appreciated about the death of Stalin is it doesn't begin with the death of Stalin. Basically, what you have here is a kind of framing device of, what is this? I guess it's the Moscow Symphony, or the Soviet People's Symphony. I'm not exactly sure what the orchestra is called, but they're doing a performance of, what is it? It's a Mozart piece. It's a piano concerto number 23, and they're doing this live over the radio. Stalin is listening, and after the performance, he contacts the radio and says, "I'd like a recording of that." Of course, they weren't recording that, but now they feel that they have to recreate the exact same performance in a recording at the last minute for Stalin, because you don't want to get on Stalin's bad side. What's so funny about this is that was she a violinist? I can't remember.
No, she's the piano soloist.
That's right, the pianist. Maria Yudina, I guess is her name. And she refuses to play for the recording because of what Stalin did with her family, basically killed them, sent them away. And so she becomes somewhat of a framing device for this book, because we see her at the very end, we see her at the beginning, and that adds not only a more human touch to what's going on here, but also it's a dig at the powers that be through this figure, Maria, the pianist.
Right. I think that's a good way to describe it. I also like this framing device because it gives I think the reader an interesting context and entry point into what Soviet Russia was like. That Stalin had this level of fear and control, but there was also this enormous amount of corruption in there, and that's kind of indicated too by the amount that they have to bribe basically Maria to come back and play.
That's right.
And also the just the facade or the creating a fake reproduction of the live musical event for the sake of Stalin. That kind of political theater that goes on with that, I think, sets us up for what's to come later, because there is the death of Stalin and the lack of really a clear plan of succession for his position starts to wear away at the veneer of order that is in place in the politics in the Soviet Union.
Right, and I'm glad that you mentioned that the orchestra and what they go through in reproducing that live recording, or attempting to, for the sake of Stalin, kind of bridges what we see with the political machinations upon, well, first Stalin's incapacitation and then his death, because what we see the orchestra going through, the director and everyone who's there at the the performance, they're in fear of Stalin, so they have to get it right. And I mean, they're literally afraid for their lives. If they don't perform like they did live over the radio, they're afraid that Stalin will have them killed. And we see some of the same things going on with the Soviet committee afterwards. People are afraid of Stalin even after he's been incapacitated and before he's dead. Of course, after he's dead, there are those who at least claim that they want to carry on his work. And so his fear lives on even after Stalin passes. So, for instance, the things that the various members of the committee, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing these names correctly, Lavrentiy Beria, Grigory Malenkov, Nikita Khrushchev, that's the one name I did recognize, Anastas Mikoyan, Lazar Kaganovich, Nikolai Bulgani, and Vyacheslav Molotov, whose name I did recognize as well. I mean, those are the people who are running around in fear, for the most part, to make sure that they don't do anything that's going to get on Stalin's bad side in the event that he did recover. Because there's one point in the story that's rather humorous. The villain of the story, I guess, is Beria. I don't know if you pronounce his name Beria or Beria. But he's the one who is the most conniving, and so he's the one who seems to be the villain here, if we can put our finger on a big bad. On the other hand, he's the one, through his villainy, that provides most of the comic relief.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know if there's anybody that we could say we're rooting for in this story, except possibly, Maria, the pianist at the beginning, and maybe Stalin's daughter, who shows up later and is a sympathetic character.
That's right.
But I think what I find interesting with the Beria stuff that you mentioned is that we would guess that most readers who are going to read a book about the death of Stalin will know that Khrushchev follows Stalin, right? And so there's an inevitability to this story so when we see Beria's machinations to be the one who succeeds Stalin, we know he's going to fail, right? So everything that he does is already kind of tinged with that dramatic irony. But I also think that adds a bit to the humor, and even to some of the really, really dark humor that's in this book, that basically he's doing all these things and he's doing a lot of terrible things, and we know all along that he's going to fail.
Right. Now, we've been emphasizing the farcical nature, the humor in this book, but at the same time, this is a very violent narrative. In fact, the creators don't spare us any of the darker side of what went on in the Soviet Union. So at the same time that we're laughing at the way that the various members of the committee are kind of fumbling around or scared, or are fumbling around and scared in trying to deal with, Stalin, his incapacitation, and then his eventual death. We're seeing violent actions. For instance, there's one section of the book where Khrushchev, they're assigning responsibilities to everyone in the immediate wake of Stalin's death. Who's going to get what responsibilities, who's going to be chair of what committees and whatnot, or what portions of the government. And as they're sitting around the table, the committees discussing these matters and assigning responsibilities, Nikita Khrushchev is left out. And someone points out, oh, well, what is, Comrade Khrushchev going to do? And then Beria mentions that, he can be in charge of organizing Stalin's funeral. And then this leads to, I think, one of the harshest, most violent moments in this book, because at first Khrushchev announces to all the citizens that anyone can come to the funeral, right? Everyone is welcome because we're all Stalin's children. If you're a member of the party, you're welcome to. But then after he does this, and of course people are traveling long distances if they're members of the party to attend this funeral, Beria points out to him, we can't handle everyone. Not only do we not have the facilities to handle so many people, but you don't want to get a lot of people into one place, because things like that lead to revolution. Which, it's funny, right? I mean, here, the Soviet leaders are talking about and afraid of revolution. But then when they retract that, and many of the people who are planning on attending are like halfway to Moscow, they decide to go ahead and go the rest of the way, even though they've been told that they won't be allowed to be at the funeral. They think, he's a great leader. We're like his children. Who's going to deny us? Well, they were denied, but they were denied at the point of a gun.
Right. And I think that's interesting that you mentioned that scene, because that is a scene that, does, I think, very much what you're describing there, which is to not skirt away from the really violent nature of this moment in history. But I'm really curious to see how that gets translated into the film, if it gets translated in the film, because it is so tonally different from the rest of it. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it is a valuable and sharp reminder of just, what really was going on at the time, and how people were, people were executed and murdered pretty regularly.
Right. For almost nothing.
Yeah. And not just, but this kind of mass execution of Soviet citizens is pretty awful. So, and I think that's an interesting counter to some of the other more farcical elements that we haven't really talked about yet, which involve Stalin's son. What's his name?
Victor.
Victor. That
Zvashgili.
Yeah. That he is, he is this kind of stereotypical, idiotic leader's son who has only gotten to his position as a general in the military because he's Stalin's son, and he abuses that position quite a bit. He parties a lot. He lives a pretty decadent lifestyle, and so a lot of the stuff he does is where some of the humor comes in, but there's also a very much a darker side to his behavior. We see, for example, at one point he's responsible for awful accident that cost the lives of many people, and some planes crash during a parade and military parade in Moscow, and other things, and his kind of violent tendencies later on. And so so the scene that you describe of the of the soldiers firing on the citizens is kind of mirrors some of the other elements that we get in the story, which is that the creators don't, they'll make you laugh, but then they kind of pull you back from that and let you realize that there are some really horrible things happening to people in this historical moment.
Right. Another, I guess, stark reminder of what went on is when we're introduced to Molotov and his wife, whom he assumes has been killed, but she actually hasn't. But she is used as a pawn by Beria in his, I guess, juxtaposition. Well, positioning himself with, to be in a power position. So, I mean, it's really terrible that he's playing on Molotov's sympathy, and in order to get where he is. But we were mentioning that scene where the soldiers are gunning down the citizens, the party members, in a very brutal way. You contrast that with another scene that you had mentioned, and that is when we see the autopsy of Stalin, and one of the doctors drops the brain, and this is also a very violent scene. And what happens here is Victor, Stalin's son, comes in, and of course he's drunk. And when he sees people in, I believe it's in the barn, the garage doing an autopsy, he thinks that in his drunken state that these people are murdering his father. And so not only do we get that scene where the brain is dropped and kind of splatters, but also Victor begins shooting everyone. Now, something like that, I mean, that's, I think, a clear example in this book of the dark humor you mentioned, right? I mean, it's very violent. Mm-hmm. And it really hits you in the gut, but there is humor there, right? You got the dropping of the brain, you got the drunk Victor. I mean, something like that reminds me of the kind of violence that you see in a Coen Brothers movie, where it's very nasty, but there is a humorous element there. But in that other scene that we mentioned, where the citizens were gunned down, there's really nothing funny surrounding that at all.
Right. It is really tragic. Hugely tragic. And so I think I'm interested to see how that'll play out when this gets adapted as a film. But it is also a very effective approach to this story as well. And to the creators' credit, they don't shy away from that horror when they could have just made this a pretty straight farce.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know that much about Russian history of this era, so I couldn't speak to any kind of accuracy on the part of this, but it is a fascinating book, and it was, again, despite some of the darkness, was fairly fun to read, I think. And, I'm glad this has gotten translated into English now.
Yeah. Now, do you know when the film will be released?
It says 2018 on the back cover, so that could be anything, but it could be any time. But just with the wonders of the internet, we can look it up pretty quickly, but I think that it'll get let's see, it's coming out in October in the UK, so it's going to get a UK release before the US, and it doesn't. Internet Movie Database doesn't give us any other information.
Well, that's interesting because, Titan Comics is based in the UK, and they have offices in the US, but it's based in the UK. because I was wondering about what all went in their decision making in terms of releasing the book now, like right before the movie or long before the movie's release. So this is coming out, I guess, around this time in the UK as well, I would assume. Not that long from October, so maybe the graphic novel or the comic will whet the appetite for moviegoers. Because I would wonder what could be gained by releasing the book and the movie at about the same time,
right?
Instead of staggering them by several months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure, but it'll be on the it'll be on the shelves by the time people in the UK at least can go see the movie. And by the way, Steve Buscemi plays Khrushchev, so I think that's an interesting choice.
Huh. Well, speaking of the Coen brothers.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and violence. I had Fargo in mind when I said that. So.
Yeah, and when I last time I taught a Coen brothers movie, one of my students asked, what makes the violence in Coen brothers movies so disturbing when there are so many other violent movies that we see all the time. And I think what you described there is it is that, when you mix humor and dark humor with violence, that does increase, with graphic violence, that does increase the disturbing nature of it. So
I agree,
that may very well be the effect of this film as well.
Yeah. So yeah, now I have to check out the film when it comes to the U.S. But yeah, we had a great time reading this book, The Death of Stalin, again by Fabien Nury and Thierry Robin, or if it's French, Robin. Mm-hmm. Let's move on to the second title that we're looking at this week, and this is Moonstruck, issue number 1, by Grace Ellis and Shae Beagle. Now, Grace Ellis is of Lumberjanes fame, but this is, I think, Shae Beagle's first major work, or at least that's what they state in the comic, right?
Right.
So, a newcomer. And in fact, one of the things that I found most striking about Moonstruck number 1 was the art.
Yes. It, they kind of describe, I think, the book is important to get us to why the art in particular stands out so much. Because we're in a world in which, mythic or fantastic creatures coexist. Mm-hmm. I don't know if we see any kind of I guess straight human characters in the book. I may be wrong about that.
Well, they're not main players if they are.
Yeah, right, exactly. And so, we have centaurs and minotaurs and werewolves and so on. But it is set in what is a familiar world. In fact, the main character, Julie, works at a coffee shop called the Black Cat. She has a coworker there. They have romantic, issues going on. She has a neighbor who's in a band, and so on. So this is a normal seeming world with these fantastic elements added to it. And so I think that's where Beagle's art really thrives, is that she's able to juxtapose those two things in such an effective way.
Mm-hmm. Right. And this takes place in an urban setting, and this could be, if you take out the fantastical element, the characters could be in, let's say, any kind of downtown area that seems to be fairly thriving, right? So you have neighbors living in apartments. You have the cafes. You have the various restaurants and bars. So things seem rather lively. The only difference between this and the reality that we know is that the characters here are various creatures, many of which you've mentioned, like werewolves or centaurs and what bats and what have you. So it's really interesting. Another thing about Beagle's art is, and this is something that I think, if I remember correctly, we wondered about, or at least speculated on a little bit when we noted this in a previews episode from a couple of months ago. The art looks like it has kind of an all-age feel to it, and because Ellis is known for her work on Lumberjanes, we were wondering if this is going to be something like Lumberjanes, or because it's at Image, it may have a more mature edge to it. I don't know. I think that at least from this first issue, this is something that I think could be published by Boom, and right alongside Lumberjanes, and there'd be no problem at all. I didn't notice that there's anything tonally different between this and other, let's say, all-age titles that I think Boom has become known for, kind of like Lumberjanes. And I have no idea why this was Image and not another publisher. It doesn't really matter. But again, it just strikes me that this is something that could easily fit in the Boom roster. Right, and and I think in general, it's the bigger audience a book like this can attract, the better. And so I will be interested in seeing how Image chooses to market the book later when it's when it starts hitting bookstores as a collection. Yeah, because it definitely has the potential for some crossover appeal with a young adult audience that may not normally be buying periodical comics on a regular basis, and not to steer away too far from the comic proper, but I also appreciate what the creators are doing with the back matter in this book, which is one they have a feature called Well Met by Moonlight, which deals with an interview with another comic pro whose work they want to spotlight. And this time they do it with a Neela Magruder, and then some there's some pinups, and then there's like a Q&A advice column. A mock Q&A.
Yeah. Ask a Know-It-All, starring Tallulah Tal. And so, and she seems to be a part of the world in which these characters interact. I think she's a mermaid.
Yeah, or a harpy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it does say you can submit your own questions. So.
Well, they had to get something going. They had to prime the pump for this first issue. And what's funny about this Ask a Know-It-All with Tallulah Tal is that almost every response to a question brings in the possibility of singing to them and drowning them.
Yeah.
That whatever the problem is, have you considered singing to them so that they'll drown?
Yep. I like it.
Yeah. It's funny. You mentioned the back matter, and we can talk about the story in a moment. But one of the things that I noticed about the back matter, the pieces that you mentioned, right? The sketch art, the interviews, and this Ask a Know-It-All section. This is the kind of thing that you do when you're wanting to create a community of readers.
Right.
It's not just give the story, but to give these little extras. Because I think, even from this very first issue, I get the sense that if you read all the back matter, you get a feel that this is something that has a community that you want to be a part of, even though this is just the first issue, right? So if there is a community behind this, I would guess relatively small. But they even do have, I think, at the very end, sketches by other artists whom they know. So again, I think that adds to the community building part of this. This is the kind of thing that webcomic creators do very effectively, is that they do these kind of things in order to capture and then nurture that kind of readership that's going to be coming back, that is going to be the success for the webcomic, whether it succeeds or not, whether they are able to get something going on Kickstarter as a collection, all depends on that community that they build. And that's what they're doing in Moonstruck. So I think that a lot of the community that surrounds this already is probably that brought over by Grace Ellis, or those who are already reading things like, Lumberjanes and comics like this. They'll find something very similar here. I wouldn't be surprised. I tell you right now, I wouldn't be surprised if, from what I've read in this first issue, the story, the back matter, all of this, if the first trade of this is nominated next year for an Eisner, or even as a best new series. Mm-hmm. So either one, because this just strikes me as something that would definitely get a lot of attention, kind of like Lumberjanes did with the Eisner Awards. Getting maybe as a way of segueing into the story proper, we mentioned that this is a fantastical world, but it's not just a fantastical world here that we're talking about. I mean, this is a community of individuals who, at least in our reality, are for the most part marginalized, right? And so when you're talking about individuals, who are maybe transgendered, or who, really don't even consider things such as gender, same-sex relationships. I mean, that's basically, at least first issue, who the individuals that we see populating this world. But it's normalized, right? Just as the fantasy element, the mythical figures here are normalized. It's just a reality that they're used to. And so I think that's another thing that is going to potentially draw a lot of readers.
Yeah, I agree completely, and I like the way you described that, because that was something I was thinking of as I was reading this. There may be some, no, I'm drawing a blank on characters' names, but Julie's co-worker, who's a centaur. Chet. Yeah. That, Chet makes some light jabs, mainly just puns that, about Julie's nature as a wereperson, a werewolf. And, but otherwise there's a sense of coexistence amongst all these different creatures. Mm-hmm. Right. And that doesn't mean that the book is tension free, because we do have the conflict that goes on with Julie's neighbors and the band,
Mark and Lindy. Yeah.
And so, there's, so it isn't just a kind of completely sanitized world. In other words, right. There's still conflict. There's still interesting plots that could come about it, but it is definitely showing a world that can coexist, in which different creatures can coexist, but also different sexualities can coexist, and so on. I mean, Chet, who's a centaur, has a crush on a minotaur. That is that is a kind of fascinating combination. With romantic possibilities. So, I really like what this book does with the way its world is created. I think, a lot of that is consistent with what Grace Ellis has already done with Lumberjanes, but it also, a lot of it has to do with Beagle's art and her ability to convey a world that combines the fantastic and the normal so well. Right.
Yeah. I have to be honest, when I saw this solicited a couple of months ago, I had wondered if I might find this a little too cute. Mm-hmm. And so I went into this kind of as a resisting reader, right? So when I picked up this first issue of Moonstruck, I thought, okay, prove something to me. And it did. I was really pleased. I don't think that, Ellis and Beagle are doing anything that is too contrived or overly cute or, let's say, overtly appealing to certain audiences. I mean, I do think that it's a clever story, it's great art, and it has a lot of potential for how these characters and the world that they inhabit can develop. I mean, there's a lot of potential here. I'm impressed.
Yeah. And I think that what you said before, too, about combine the world building along with the community building that goes on in the back matter, and I think this book has a recipe for some success.
Mm-hmm.
And I really, it's a book that, I mean, it's you said overly cute. I mean, it's cute. I mean, cute was one of the first things I thought of when I was reading it, but it's really endearing, and it's a kind of book that, I kind of really root for in the marketplace right now.
Yeah, and I think, we were talking about earlier this being an image book. I had mentioned that it could easily fit into Boom. I'm glad that this is an image book, because I think that had this come out as a Boom Studios title, and there would be nothing wrong with that, but I think that people would look at other things that it's closely associated with it, like Lumberjanes, and may not give it much of a chance, right? In other words, readers who aren't normally predisposed to those kind of titles may not give Moonstruck a chance. But the fact that this is an image title, then I think this has the potential to gain, at least initially, a wider reading audience than if this had come out from Boom Studios.
Right. And yeah, and maybe get an audience that is doesn't get past maybe the image section in the previous catalog. One of the other things I wanted to mention with this book is that Ellis and Beagle aren't the only creators involved, and there's the character Julie is a fan of a young, I guess I don't even know, young adult, it would be young, whatever, preteen book series called The Pleasant Mountain Sisters, which is, a lot like, looks a lot like The Babysitter Club and
right,
and Sweet Valley High and books like that. And we get an excerpt from that book, and I think that excerpt is drawn by Kate Leth.
That's what I thought. They mentioned that Leth will do a short story within this first narrative arc, which I guess will be in the first trade. But unless I missed it, I don't think there's any place in this first issue that mentions that Leth is the one who does this one page. Actually, not even one whole. No, it is one whole page.
Yeah.
Of this book.
Yeah, I'm assuming that's her because it looks like her art, and she's credited as a guest artist. And there's nothing else in here that she may have done other than, there are the pinups in the back, but none of those are credited to her. So, so I'm pretty sure that's her contribution to the book. Maybe a listener who knows better can correct me if I'm wrong. But if that's the case, then that we're going to get more of that story. It's not just going to be the one page view into the book that Julie is fascinated with, and the series that she's fascinated with, and it seems to be one of the bonding moments that she had on this first date with someone named Selena, who we haven't seen yet. We only see the two of them text to each other, we have to wait maybe till next issue or later to see who Selina is.
Yeah, that Julie's all gaga over.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, there's a scene we haven't mentioned yet, and I think this is basically the crux of what I'm thinking will be the crisis point that drives this first trade. When Chet sends Julie to another bar, coffee bar, I guess, to get some, stirrers.
Right.
Someone working behind the counter is a character named Cass, and she is kind of a Cassandra figure because at one point she goes into a trance. It's almost as if she's struck by lightning. It has that look. And when she is in this kind of almost trance state, she says, Prepare for the fates are plotting, from their spinning two threads are knotting, beneath the cold moon their ends draw near, united in love, but divided by fear. Concede your heart to the universe's hum, steel yourself for the worst is yet to come. And of course, this scares the crap out of Julie, and this is when we first see her become a werewolf, because we see a figure that looks wolf-like or canine of some sort, leaving this bar, running away after that moment. And it's Julie. And it's at this point that we learn that she turns into a werewolf whenever she's scared, whenever she's anxious. And so there's something about this divination that has caused her to run in fear. But we don't know exactly what Cass is referring to, what she's divining. But I guess we'll find out in the issues to come. And so I do think that this is going to be the crisis that drives this first narrative arc.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. That's an important scene. And that's why it gets a double-page spread to emphasize that significance as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so, so that also establishes, I guess, the rules for Julie's lycanthropy, that she is not it's not a full moon.
Right.
It is more like a Hulk type situation.
Yeah, that's good. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, definitely Hulk-like.
Yeah.
Andy, you want to move on to the third and final title that we're looking at this week?
Yeah. So this is a bit of a different, I guess, type of book or than we have normally talked about. Most of the things that we talk about, either you could get through the previous catalog or you can order from a self-published creator's website or some other venue. But one of the books I wanted to talk about this week is Kros, Hallowed Ground by John Ostrander and Tom Mandrake, which recently came out for those who supported the Kickstarter campaign for this book, which I think was probably a couple of years ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it has been a long time coming for this book, but to Ostrander and Mandrake's credit, they've been keeping those people who supported the Kickstarter updated pretty regularly with status reports, but also with art samples of what Mandrake has been working on. And so it's interesting that they first of all that they went the route of going not only through Kickstarter but with an original graphic novel, and because this just came out for those backers, it's not clear yet as to how this might be available for general readers. Mm-hmm. Possibly if you see Ostrander and or Mandrake at a comic convention, I would guess that they would have copies of this. But right now there's a website for Kros Hallowed Ground, and it's KROS Hallowed Ground, that has some information on the book, but it doesn't say exactly yet how you can get it. So hopefully we will see we'll see this become available for a more general audience outside of the backers. But what initially attracted me to back the Kickstarter were two things. First of all, this reunion of Ostrander and Mandrake. I loved their Spectre series that they did for DC back in the day, and they've collaborated on a lot of other stuff, both before and after. And they did Grimjack for First Comics, and they later did Martian Manhunter for DC and some other stuff. And Firestorm. So they're to me, they're one of the great writer-artist teams in mainstream comics. But on top of that, the high concept of Kros, I feel, was really a hook for me as well, which is basically very, very easy to summarize. It's about vampires at the Battle of Gettysburg. and Kros is a vampire hunter who works under the authority of President Lincoln to fight this basically parallel war with vampires that's going on at the same time as the Civil War. And the fact that the Battle of Gettysburg is the bloodiest battle in the war is that battle is attracting all these vampires to it. And so in the midst of that battle, Kros and some other figures that are known as Dhampir, who are supernatural characters but are vampire hunters as well.
So you said Dhampir. Is it Dhampir or Dhampire? Because I thought vampire, Dhampire.
Oh. It's spelled in the German way that that Vampir is the vampire spelled as Vampir. But anyway, so Kros has to navigate these two wars that are going on simultaneously. His work for Abraham Lincoln puts him on the side of the Union, but as he points out in several times, that his battle transcends the Civil War.
Right.
And
it's not North against South. It's not black against white. His war is against the vampires.
Yeah, it's humanity versus vampires, right?
Yeah.
And so that unites everybody. So that basic high concept I was really interested in, and I really wanted to see, new art by Tom Mandrake, who I've always liked, and who does great work with horror. He has a style that reminds me of Gene Colan a bit, especially the way he draws kind of spiritual figures in motion and stuff. And
yes.
I also should mention too that he's going to be drawing the Captain Kronos Vampire Hunter series for the Hammer line at Titan. So we're going to get to see pretty soon some more Tom Mandrake vampire goodness. But in the meantime, I mean, this book, if you're a fan of Mandrake's art, I think this book is a showcase for it.
Right. Yeah, I have to agree with you and say that I like Kros Hallowed Ground. The thing I loved most about it, though, was Mandrake's art. Mm-hmm. It just reminds me of the kind of art that I guess marked mostly my early love of comics. And it's not often that you see this kind of art much anymore. I mean, this does have a really good, let's say, 1970s feel to it in terms of the art. And so that's one of the things that really drew me. Now, I got a quick question for you. Now, mm-hmm. This is Ostrander and Mandrake's title that they kickstarted, but it does mention that the publisher is Third Eye Skull. Now, is this something that is Ostrander and Mandrake, or is this something outside of Ostrander and Mandrake?
That's something I'm not sure about, but I'm assuming that it is them, this is kind of their company. I can't find anything else out. There isn't a website for Third Eye Skull, so I'm not sure where that.
Because on the copyright page, it says that as you would expect to find, no portion of this book may be reproduced or transmitted, blah, 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 without permission of the creators, John Ostrander and Tom Mandrake, or the publisher, Third Eye Skull.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. But anyway, what were you saying that about, the art especially being, kind of hearkening back to a style of art that we don't see very much anymore, especially the 70s and 80s horror comics that were coming out of DC. And I think where Mandrake probably cut his teeth as an artist as well.
Are you being punny now? This being a vampire story?
Yeah, I didn't think about that. But yeah, I'll take credit for it. But one of my favorite things in this book that is the most like the best showcase of Mandrake's style is this figure that we get called the Vampire Grotesque.
Oh God, yeah, that was my favorite as well.
And we see this creature form on the battlefield, and basically it is a bunch of parts of vampires
or soldiers who have been turned.
Yes.
By the vampires,
right?
Who are feasting on in the aftermath of the bloody battle.
Exactly. Who kind of piece themselves together, either tying themselves together with ropes, chains, or straps or spikes, and this creature. So some of it's torsos and heads and some legs and so on, and the creature just kind of lumbers around in this destructive way, and it is just kind of out of this world, grotesque. So and
this is not a Frankenstein monster, right? This is not a creature that has a human form made of different body parts. I mean, this is parts of people's bodies that are coming together in a hodgepodge way to create, as it's called, this grotesque that is just large and lumbering without any kind of systematic form.
Right. And we should mention that the main villain in this story is a vampire named Bully Boyd, who has his background as part of the kind of Irish gangs that thrived in New York City in the middle part of the 19th century. And so the Vampire Grotesque kind of works for him, but he didn't make it. I mean, I think one of the ways we could imagine is that he just kind of puts this thing together, but instead it kind of forms on its own out of instinct, that these pieces, these pieces of partially destroyed vampires just pick themselves up and put themselves together into this form, which makes it even more horrifying.
Right.
And so that leads me to one of the things that I thought was really interesting and about this book in terms of what hooked me on it immediately was that kind of almost like 30 Days of Night, where you have the idea of, vampires in Barrow, Alaska. That seems like such a great approach to vampires. And I think that, that Steve Niles and Ben Templesmith, in that original graphic novel, at least, or miniseries, really did a great job of exploiting that concept. And I haven't read every single work of vampire literature, so I don't know if anybody's ever done Vampires at Gettysburg before, but it just seems like such a obvious idea that I'm surprised nobody had done it before.
Yeah.
But also
point.
it gave me a sense of like, of the, you know, that there are still these original ideas out there, you know. So having this taking place during the Civil War, and having Ostrander also deals with the reality behind the Civil War, what caused it, the conflicts between the different sides, and how Kros has to navigate those conflicts in order to defeat this larger enemy. But also that things like the vampire grotesque point to just how creative this work is. So I think listeners, potential readers who might feel like the vampire idea has been played out, might find that there's something different at least going on in Kros. Right.
You mentioned Bully Boyd and he having his roots in, an Irish gang in New York City at the time. Leads me to I guess another part of Kros Hallowed Ground that I wanted to mention. I like the story. I absolutely love Mandrake's art. Again, that's the high point for me. Although I do have to say there were parts of Ostrander's story that had me wondering at times if it was actually complete. Every now and again, as I was reading this, I got the feeling that there was much more to the story that maybe Ostrander wanted to include in this, but couldn't for whatever reason. And so there were bits left out. And so every now and again, I read a passage and I wondered, okay, so what is this person's relationship to this other character? Or there's a backstory here somewhere that I'm expected to know, I think, but I don't know what that backstory is. Did I not read carefully? Little bits like that. In other words, it just seemed to me that there was a lot of ambition that went into Kros Hallowed Ground that maybe Ostrander and Mandrake couldn't contain. It's almost as if the idea exceeded the grasp of what we have in this actual graphic novel here. And I'll give you an example of this. And I don't know if we have page numbers, but this is about maybe 2/3, if that, through the book. Now, you mentioned the protagonist, Elias Kros. This is a point where he recruits an actual soldier, a captain from the Confederate Army. So Kros is working for the Union, and there's someone that Kros knows by the name of Captain Fletcher, who is a Confederate officer. And so he is actually a prisoner, but Kros is able to convince the Union to release them, to help him. So Fletcher is going to be working with Kros and then a number of others. And one of those others is the young boy in the book. His name is Jack Moses McGuire. And Kros is telling people his plan to go up against Bully Boyd and his crew. And at one point, Kros says that he wants to use the young boy, Jack Moses, in this scheme. And the woman who owns the plantation that they're on, or the land, Laura Wales, says, "You cannot mean to take the boy." And then Kros responds, "He's seen more blood and horror than most men. A boy can serve well against vampires." And then Captain Fletcher says, "As I know well." And I thought, okay, I have no idea what he means here. Am I going to learn something after this moment about maybe Fletcher's past? And maybe he did something when he was a boy and he's making that comment. Little things like that would happen. I mean, I never did figure out what Fletcher meant by that comment. It's never followed through. Well, and there were little moments like that throughout the story that I wondered maybe that little piece wasn't tied off that well.
Well, I mean, if we see the introduction of Captain Fletcher earlier, when he is being held prisoner and Kros is talking to him, Fletcher introduces himself to these other Union soldiers and says, "My name is Captain Ashley Fletcher, and we last met some 20 years ago." Or actually, he says to Kros, Kros, that Fletcher sees him and says, "By God, Elijah Kros, it is you." And Kros says, "Do I know you?" And Fletcher says, "Yeah, we last met some 20 years ago when I was about the age of this pup here." Mm-hmm. And then he goes on to explain toward down Louisiana way where the misstep bent Balmoral Plantation. You did my family a service, although Mama would not have called it that. I am somewhat altered by time, but I must say you have not changed, and so on. And so Fletcher alludes to the story about his childhood, about what happened to him as a child, that Kros saved him. And then I don't know if you looked at the prose story. Is that in the PDF?
That's in the very back.
Yeah, and that tells that story.
Yeah, and so, and I know that, and also in the back of the book we have a really nice series of character sketches and also character descriptions. In essence, you have the significance of Captain Fletcher. We actually have his full name, Captain Ashley Fletcher, and they describe him as Ashley Fletcher first met Kros when the Dampier hunted down a vampire on the captain's family plantation in Balmoral. Fletcher had hoped never to encounter the vampire hunter again. So, again, this information, I think, does clarify some things, but I used that passage that I cited a moment ago as just one of several instances where I felt that there was information that wasn't embedded in the comic or the story itself, but in maybe ancillary material like character sketches, like, let's say, the prose piece in the back. It may be there. And in fact, reading these character sketches in the very back, I learned more about some of these characters that way than I learned through the comic proper.
Right. Well, I think what we're getting there, maybe, I mean, because we do get, first of all, the hint of Fletcher's backstory at the very beginning of the book, and then we get the prose short story that lays it out completely, is that this is not meant to be the only time we see Elijah Kros. And that Ostrander and Mandrake are setting up a world and mythology, I guess, for more that more stories can be created from, because we get these other Dampier like Damon,
yeah,
who's a Korean vampire hunter, and the former Dampier is now who's now a
Mercy
vampire,
Harper,
Mercy
yes.
Harper, and one of the things that Kros says kind of towards the end is that he's met many other Dampier in his life along the way, and he is the only one he knows who hasn't given in to vampirism or hasn't been turned himself. So, there's and we know that Mercy goes back to the Salem witch trials,
right?
So we can have Kros Salem witch trial stories. We can have Kros, and he and Damon allude to a battle that they have with vampires in Rome. So there's a lot of potential here. I think that that a lot of those things you're seeing is kind of them maybe not having enough space to develop these stories. I was seeing more as seeds being planted for other stuff, but whether it's more prose short stories by Ostrander, like The Crimson Bayou, or more graphic novels. And one of the other things about the nature of this book that led me to think that there can possibly be more is that, at least early on, I didn't trace this all the way throughout, but there seemed to be while there aren't chapter divisions, there seem to be pretty consistent kind of beats at about the point that, say, a single issue of a comic would end. And then those beats are usually followed by a splash page on the next page, leading me to think that there was an original plan for this to possibly be like a mini series that then, because they talk about too in the back how they've been working on this for years, for more than 10 years. So that maybe the original intention was a mini series, and now through Kickstarter, that instead of doing it that way, they've done it as an original graphic novel.
Right.
So this series clearly has had a life for a long time for the creators, probably a long time too then to develop, gestate some backstory and future stories for these characters. So I really hope that those seeds, those indeed are seeds that are being planted for future stories, and with the success of this Kickstarter campaign, that we may see more.
Right. And, what you just said is actually a flip side of the feeling that I had, that there were parts of this story that had, some not major gaps. And I felt it was incomplete. The other side of that is, as you mentioned, there is a larger world that they have planned here. And, I did get the feeling from the very beginning of this that Kros is going to be a character, or is going to be a property that is going to be something that's ongoing, right? This is not the last that we'll see of it, at least I hope, that there's something grander involved. And so some of those gaps in reading through this Kros Hallowed Ground narrative could be filled in easily enough as this property develops, as we learn more about Kros, his past, and the people that he encountered at different times, like the Salem witch trial, as you mentioned. So, and another thing, I don't know if you and I made clear what a dhampir is. A dhampir, at least from my understanding here, is the result of it's both vampire and human. So it's a combination. And so when you mentioned that Kros is the only dhampir he knows who hasn't succumbed to the thirst, right, for succumbed to becoming a vampire, and that's something that we actually see Kros struggling with. At one point, he's literally surrounded by blood of the fallen soldiers, and at a weak moment, he almost gives in.
Right.
And so that there is a bit of vampire in Kros that he finds it hard to resist. And I think that it is another interesting take on the vampire narrative, right? Where you have this combination, not just a vampire, not just a human, but a little bit of both. And so what that really volatile combination can do in a particular character.
Right. And, and that gets a little bit to the origin of Kros too, that he was in utero when his mother was turned into a vampire, which, I think is also the origin of Blade in the Marvel universe, if I remember right. Again, somebody may correct me because I don't have that in front of me. But I think, the reason why Blade is referred to as the Daywalker is because he is only part vampire because he was infected in the womb.
Right, and the similar thing going on here with Kros,
right.
because Kros can go out during the day.
Exactly. So, and just kind of looking back on, I don't see on Kickstarter when the date this was finished, but it was in 2015, so it has been a couple of years, and it had a goal of just under 50,000, and it hit almost 57,000 with 824 backers, which is pretty good. So, probably the success of this Kickstarter campaign hope that we'll get to see more.
Right, and who knows? We're seeing more and more kickstarted campaigns being published by or picked up by larger publishers,
right,
like Image or Dark Horse. And so this could be something that, and again, I'm not too sure of the publisher here, Third Eye Skull, if that is just Ostrander and Mandrake, or if there's something else, there's other people involved. But maybe with the success of this, then we can find a larger outlet for future Kros stories. Because, as you pointed out at the top of our discussion on this title, this is a different kind of review. I don't know if we've ever done a review on the Comics Alternative of a kickstarted book where our listeners could not go out somewhere and relatively easy get a copy after they've heard our review. If they didn't back Kickstarter, they may have to wait for a while. Or let's say, as you mentioned, if they see Ostrander or Mandrake at a con, maybe get a copy of the book through them that way.
Yeah, because I'm trying to think of the other stuff I've kickstarted, and I think most of which we've never talked about, or if we talked about something that was a Kickstarter book like Sex Castle, by Kyle Starks. We talked about it once Image had published it.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So maybe something similar will happen here.
I would hope. But that's one of the things I do also like about Kickstarter. It's not only that some newer creators can get work out and have that work get picked up by major publishers the way Kyle did with Sex Castle, and that was such a huge success. But that creators like Ostrander and Mandrake, who've been around for a while, but are not getting work from the big publishers like they used to, that they could kind of prove that they have a following. I think maybe Ditko could be the best example of that, since he's pretty much exclusively launching every new project now every couple of months through Kickstarter. Yeah. And even though we did talk about those books, but even then you can still get Ditko's books from somewhere else.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm looking at the stuff I've kickstarted. No, well, yeah. So most of it, Purgatory Pub we talked about.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we did. And
very early on.
That would be difficult. Yeah, that'd be difficult to find a copy unless you can go to Gabe himself.
Yeah, go to Gabe himself or see him at a show. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I hope we end up seeing. Not only that, I hope we end up seeing more of Kros, but I hope that the success of this particular Kickstarter campaign can kind of show that, that that Ostrander and, we're going to see more work from Mandrake soon, but that the two of them as a team still are viable.
Mm-hmm. So those are the three titles that Andy and I discussed this week. We started off with Fabien Nury and Thierry Robin's The Death of Stalin. Hold on. We started off with Fabien Nury and Thierry Robin's The Death of Stalin. After that, we looked at Moonstruck #1 by Grace Ellis and Shae Beagle. And then we concluded with Kros, Hallowed Ground by John Ostrander and Tom Mandrake.
Yeah, three interesting books this week.
Yes, and in each case, the books dealt with monsters in one form or another.
I guess that's true.
Yes. Or difference, if we want to look at it in a more positive way.
Yeah.
And if you want to find great titles like these, Well, except for Kros, because you can't find Kros there. It's a Kickstarter. You would do well to visit the website of our sponsor, which is Discount Comic Book Service. That's right. Go to dcbservice.com. They have great discounts every single month on so many titles. It is unbelievable. That's dcbservice.com. And after you do get your titles there, get in touch with us and let us know what you're going to be reading. If you go to our website, comicsalternative.com, you'll find that you can leave us a voice message online via SpeakPipe. Or you can call us the old-fashioned way by picking up the phone and dialing 4153-COMICS. That's 415-326-6427.
That's right. Or you can get a hold of us by email. We are two guys at comicsalternative.com. You can also get a hold of us individually. I'm Andy at comicsalternative.com.
And I'm Derek at comicsalternative.com.
You can also check out our Twitter feed, which is at the number 2 guys with PhDs.
That's right. You can also find us on Facebook, Tumblr, Instagram, Google+, Goodreads, Pinterest, and YouTube. You can subscribe to the podcast through iTunes. You can stream us on Stitcher. You can also find us on TuneIn, on Spotify, on iHeartRadio, and on Google Play Music. But you can find every single one of our podcast episodes, as well as the reviews and comics-related commentary that we post on our blog, simply by going to our website, comicsalternative.com.
That's right. All the ways to get a hold of us, let us know how we're doing, and find out what we're doing.
That's right. And we do want to hear from you. Until then, I'm Derek.
And I'm Andy. See ya.
Hey, what happened?